You already looked in the mirror not with your eyes, but with the soul, and had the feeling that you don't recognize yourself. Maybe you live a functional life, with routines, tasks, relationships, perhaps even successfully, prestige and stability. But inside something range, a restlessness that has no name, an absence of belonging even when everything seems right. Carl Jung called this alienation of himself, a state in which the person lives but does not inhabit his own existence. She acts but doesn't feel. She adapts to what was expected, but she didn't choose. Since childhood, we are shaped to be what the world wants: the ideal child, the exemplary student, the efficient professional. And without realizing it, we will become experts in meeting expectations while our essence is being silenced. The discomfort that appears later, this silent crisis, this anguish that emerges without warning, is not a mistake. It is a symptom. It is the soul trying to warn that you are far from yourself. And that's where the most serious journey of adulthood begins. Not to turn someone, but to find out who in fact you are already, behind the papers, the fears, the characters who taught you to interpret. Most do not hear this call, prefers to anesthetize, distract yourself, continue representing, but some decide to stop, to look, to listen, and then they find out. The discomfort of not recognizing themselves. It is the beginning of the process of reuniting. Jung called the persona the mask we use to interact with the world. She is not false by itself, she is functional. It is she who allows us to occupy social roles, establish relationships, work, live in society. The problem is when we forget that it is just a mask, and we believe she is us. From an early age, we started shaping this persona to be accepted. We learn what is right, what is beautiful, what is expected. We have learned to hide what does not fit. And so, we are creating an edited version of ourselves, more palatable, safer, more praised. But the persona, when overlapping the soul, becomes a prison. How many times have you been acting on social impulse, not genuine desire? How many times have you smiled for education, said yes for fear of rejection, or sustained an opinion just to avoid conflict? This is not falsehood, this is persona. But over time, overwhelming adaptation charges a price, the emptying of the actual identity. The anguish of not recognizing itself often comes from excessive performance. When we live too much time being what others expect, we forget who we are when no one is looking. And the most curious thing is that the more successful persona, the deeper the empty behind it. Because the social success of the persona can mean the silent failure of the true self. Deconstructing the persona does not mean becoming antisocial. It means no longer depending on external approval to validate existence itself. It is the first step in re-inhabiting its essence. Without fear, without performance, without masks. Jung said there is no true light without the integration of the shadow. And this is not a romantic metaphor, it is a deep alert. The shadow, for Jung, is not just the bad side of the human being. It is the whole of all that you have repressed, hid, or denied throughout your life. Not only negative traits such as envy, anger, vanity, but also dormant powers, legitimate desires, muffled talents, everything that did not match the persona you built and was pushed to this invisible basement. And here is the point. What you reject in yourself continue to exist, only in the dark, and what's in the dark controls you. Have you ever felt a sudden and disproportionate anger at something apparently small? Have you ever seen yourself judging someone hard, not knowing why? Have you sabotaged relationships, projects, or opportunities, as if something inside you were pulling the brake without reason? These are signs of shadow in action. While the persona pretends control, the shadow screams for recognition. And when it is not heard, she screams louder. She appears in her dreams, in her repetitive conflicts, in her most difficult impulses to control. It projects itself on others. You start to see out what is repressed inside. What you hate the other is often a reflection of what you can't admit in you. But the shadow doesn't want to destroy you. She wants to be integrated. This is one of the most poorly interpreted points of deep psychology. To integrate the shadow is not to surrender to chaos, nor romanticize their own defects. It is recognizing that you are that too. That there is anger, yes. That there is insecurity, that there is selfishness, but there is also courage, love, intuition, and a true desire to evolve. Shadow integration is the most painful and most liberating process of the path of individuation. Because it is when you stop running from yourself and start looking with maturity. You are not just your light. You are also what you hid from it. And only when you have the courage to look at your own darkness without judgment, do you really begin your freedom. If there is a central concept in Jung's psychology, it is that of individuation. Do not confuse with individualism. It is not about isolating or putting yourself above others, but of becoming whole, a complete human being in which all parts of the psyche are integrated and conscious. Jung believed that the great purpose of human existence is not to achieve an unreachable perfection, but to accept and integrate all parts of himself. The journey of individuation is the way of returning to mesm, the unifying center of the psyche, which goes far beyond the ego. This self is not built, he is discovered. He has always been there, hoping to be revealed as you leave the false layers, the masks, the conditioning. But why is it so hard to follow this path? Because the process requires losses. To find yourself, you need to undress. You need to disappoint those who expected you to be another way. You need to give up the ready-made truths that once served you, but today they imprison you. You need to let you die parts of yourself that have already fulfilled your role, and this psychic mourning is real. Individual is the opposite of conformism. As long as the world insists that you are predictable, equal, adaptable, mesm calls you something greater, to be true to your truth, even if it removes you from the herd. This is why in many moments this journey may seem lonely, painful, even meaningless, because you are coming out of the socially approved route and entering an inner, unknown, deep territory. But it is in this territory that you find peace, the peace of not having to pretend, the peace of not living explaining itself, the peace of feeling that for the first time you are not cheating on. This process is organic. It does not follow a calendar. There is no shortcut and cannot be forced. Every crisis you cross, every fall that seemed meaningless, each break, can be part of the individuation work. It can be the soul calling you back home. You are not here to fit. It's here to become whole. And wholeness is not absence of conflict. It is knowing how to welcome their own opposite with maturity. It is being able to laugh at their own chaos, recognize failures without hate, accept that you are a being in process, always under construction. In the end, individuation is not a destination. It is a way of walking, a way of existence that honor who you were, respect who you are, and welcome who you are becoming. Much of psychic suffering, according to Jung, is born from a deep split between what we are and what we show. This is what he called the persona domination, this social mask we built to be accepted, respected, loved. The persona is not a mistake. It has a function, allows us to circulate in the world, occupy papers, and interact. But the problem begins when we forget that it is just a part, and we believe it is the whole. When the mask glues on the skin, it is at this moment that the emptiness arises. You have a job, but you feel something is wrong. It has relationships, but feels disconnected. It has achievements, but they lose their rapid shine. This is because who is living these things is the persona, not your true self, and the more you feed this mask, the more it requires. You start living in a kind of constant performance. Choose words, gestures, postures, as if you were on a stage. Worse, it begins to believe that if you abandon this performance, no one will love you. Because what was presented to the world is not you. It is the edited version, approved, palatable, the version that works. Jung said that when the soul is suffocated by the persona, she begins to scream. And these screams emerge as symptoms, crises of anxiety, insomnia, anxieties that seem without cause, exhaustion. It's the psyche saying, "Hey, there's something more here. You're ignoring me." Rejecting the true self in the name of the persona is like planting plastic flowers. On the outside it looks beautiful, but inside nothing grows. And what does it mean to abandon this scam? It's not exposing everything, nor break with the world. It is starting to listen to what was silenced. It is to allow yourself to feel angry, sadness, desire without censorship. It is accepting that you do not need to be perfect to deserve to exist. It is to stop explaining yourself all the time. Stop justifying your own being. The rejection of the true self is a form of self-abandoning. And there is no greater pain than this one. But at the slightest sign of reconciliation, at the slightest gesture of internal reception, something begins to flourish again. Vitality returns, authenticity reappears, and life gradually is no longer a representation, and it is experience again. What have you been doing to get closer to who you really are? In the individuation process, Jung puts the shadow as one of the most crucial and most painful steps. The shadow is all that you reject in you, not only their obscure flaws and impulses, but also bright parts that have been devalued and silenced throughout life. Do you know that talent you stifled because someone laughed at him? That emotion that learned to hide because they said it was weak? Those wills you buried because they didn't match the image they expected from you? All of this lives in the shadow, and what is not seen does not disappear. On the contrary, it is strengthened in the unconscious, gains its own life. This is why we often sabotage ourselves without realizing it, why we repeat patterns of suffering, why we explode out of nowhere or sighten in silence. The shadow takes the steering wheel when the ego refuses to look in the mirror, but Jung said that gold is in the shadow. That is, what we fear the most, it also hides the greatest power of transformation. It is when crossing this darkness that we find the forgotten parts of ourselves, and with them a new kind of freedom. But this confrontation requires courage. Courage to stop pointing out the finger and start asking, what in me collaborates with this suffering? What have I avoided feeling? What do I criticize in others because I haven't accepted myself yet? To face the shadow is like descending to the catacombs of the soul. There, you will find old pain, raw swallows, unvividual loves, but it also finds brute strength, creative instinct, life impulse. It is not about giving vent to everything that is there, but of integrating, to name, to reconcile. Because what you accept, you start to transform, and what you transform no longer dominate you. The shadow is no longer enemy when you stop running away from it. And this moment, this exact point of the journey, is where many people give up. Because it's dark, it's uncomfortable, it's unstable. But this is also where true liberation begins, because this is where you find parts of yourself that have been imprisoned for a long time. And by redeeming these parts, you are full again. If the shadow is the underground of the psyche, the process of individuation is conscious climb, slow, arduous, but deeply transformative. Jung described individuation as a return movement to the center, a journey in which the individual ceases to live fragmented and begins to integrate all his parts into a coherent and authentic whole. But beware, individual yourself is not to become someone superior, illuminated, or perfect. On the contrary, it is accepting your humanity without masks. It is to recognize its limitations, its wounds, its paradoxes, and yet follow with more conscience and less judgment. During the first half of life, we are shaped to fit. We seek approval, adapt our ideas, choose safe ways. We created a successful image based on external parameters, profession, status, appearance, recognition. But there comes a time when this structure begins to crumble. What supported our identity no longer makes sense. The work that was once a pride becomes a prison. The relationship that seemed stable proves to be empty. The compliments no longer fill. The full schedule does not rule out the feeling of emptiness. This is where individuation knocks on the door, and she comes with uncomfortable questions. Who am I without all this? What did I repress to fit? What really moves me? What still makes sense? Individual crossing involves three fundamental verbs: deconstructing, accepting, and reconstructing. Deconstruct the false self that we build to be accepted. Accept the denied parts of us, the lights and the shadows. Reconstruct a more true identity that does not need external validation to exist. This process is not linear. It involves relapses, resistances, internal conflicts, but it also involves profound discoveries, sensations of freedom never before experienced, and a peace that is born not from the absence of pain, but of reconciliation with it. Individual is therefore a call to courage. The courage to be who you are, even if it makes you strange in the eyes of the world. The courage to abandon the comfort of the persona and dive into the mystery of the self. This psychic center that drives us silently towards all. At the end of this crossing, there is no guarantees of full happiness, but there is something even rarer, the feeling of being whole, to have become, finally, what it has always been, but that has spent a lifetime trying to remember. If the persona is the mask and the shadow is the basement, the self is the heart. The self is the unifying center of the psyche, what pulsates behind all our roles, conflicts, and contradictions. Jung describes him how the totality archetype, the deep core of the soul, the point where all parts meet, are integrated, reconcile. But almost no one lives from the self. We live from the periphery, of the image, of expectations, from the rush. We spend much of our lives running, away from depth, too busy to hear the silence, too distracted to realize the signs that come from within. The self doesn't scream, he whispers. He appears in symbolic dreams, in the repressed desires, the longing we feel of something we never had. It manifests itself in the moments of rupture, in crises that force a reassessment, in the voids that tear us off the surface. And when life forces us to stop, for a loss, a disease, an abrupt change, a sense of exhaustion, it's as if the self finally said, "Now can we talk?" The journey to this center is everything but linear. It requires crossing the shadow, disassembling the persona, facing the complexes and healing old wounds. It requires courage to accept that not everything in us is beautiful, but everything is necessary. It requires humility to recognize that we do not have all the answers, and that sometimes not having the beginning of wisdom. The self is not something that is achieved as a trophy. It is something that reveals itself as we drop what we are not. It is a recognition, not an invention. It is a reunion with something essential, which has always been there, but that, out of fear, pride, or oblivion, we leave it. Jung said that the self symbol often appears in the mandalas, those symmetrical circular figures that represent unity, balance, and integration. It's no wonder. Mandala is a visual representation of what it means to live centered. And perhaps that is what the most missing in our time. Centrality, interity, presence. Today, most people are shattered. A part that works too much, another that pretends to be well, another that does not support one's own story, another that longs for love, but fears surrendering. Fragments of a self that tries to work but has lost itself. The self invites reunification. He promises no comfort, no glory. But it promises true, and that deep down is all we seek. An inner place where we don't have to pretend, where we can rest being who we are. Finding the self is like coming home, but a house that has never been seen on the outside, just inside. A house that has no fixed address, because it is you. And when you find this center, everything around changes. The world can remain noisy, chaotic, unfair. But there is silence within you that no longer shakes so easy. This is the apex of the individuation process. Not an end, but the beginning of a new way of being in the world. A lighter, more true, more rooted way. You are still having trouble, still facing pain, but you are no longer struggling with yourself. You recognize yourself, and that changes everything. The self is not a luxury. It is a forgotten necessity. It is the axis of the soul. And without it, as much as we succeed, fame or applause, we will still feel empty. Therefore, the search for individuation is not just a journey of self-knowledge. It is a rescue, an internal reconstruction that gives us the wholeness that the fragmented life has stolen us. And now, you may begin to understand why Jung said that the greatest tragedy of the human being is not failure. It is never being who it really is. By this time of your life, you may have felt this subtle discomfort, as if something was out of place, as if, as much as everything looks good, something still missed. Jung would call this the call of the self, a call that does not scream but insists. You can keep running away. You can continue to accumulate external achievements while the soul wilts inside. You can keep the mask, the paper, the persona for a few more years, a few decades, until one day she cracks. Because every artificial structure has expiration date. Or you can stop, to look, to listen, not the world, but yourself. This process, to confront the shadow, to abandon the imposed script, to question what you call the self, not easy. It's lonely. It requires losses, ruptures, crises, but it also offers something that no external achievement can give, the feeling of being whole, to be alive, finally at home. Individual is the most important journey that a human being can do, because in it you are no longer a character and start to become a presence. It is not a way for everyone, but if you have arrived here, you may have started. And if this message has played something inside you, share it with someone who is also on this crossing. Someone who is tired of living to seem and really wants to learn to be. Leave your comment here. How much of what you live today is yours? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, because here we do not deliver ready answers. We walk along with the right questions. We see you in the next episode of your inner journey. And until then, don't forget, maybe you haven't started living yet, but it's never too late to start over, from the inside out.